Hello everyone and welcome to our fan guest of honour interview. My name's Margaret and I'm here with my very good friends Helen and Philippa, whom I met and got to know many years ago after I went to my first Octocon in 1992. Helen and Philippa met much earlier than that, and they met through their love of science fiction, Star Trek and all things like that. I'll hand over to you ladies and let you tell us, because I had the pleasure of meeting with you on the actual anniversary of the 40th year of your first meeting back in 1980, and that was at a Star Trek convention. Please tell us a little bit about that.
Well, thank you, Margaret. Thanks everybody to the Octocon committee, to everybody who sent us well wishes and so on. It really is an honour to be fan guest of honour. We are delighted to be able to share our experiences. As you say, Margaret, we met over 40 years ago at this stage. I suppose what we're going to do is we've got a few little bits and pieces of memorabilia. So I'll let you talk in a minute, Helen. Honestly, I will. But
she doesn't. Yeah.
This is the magazine that started it all off, and it was Star Trek Action Group. And in that Star Trek Action Group newsletter was a little friendship corner, it was called. And there's two ads in there, and one is from Alison in Glasgow, and one is from a guy called Brendan Ryder, who, seeing as it's National Coming Out Day, well, yeah, I was Brendan Ryder for about quite a while, and then I found my true self and became Philippa. But I was very much Brendan when I met Helen, and I let her talk about.
Well, basically, I wrote to the girl in Scotland, Ali, and so she wrote to Philippa, and we all started, lots of pen pals. We were just chatting just before this started about the fact that pen pals at that time was the main way of communicating with people at the same interest. Now we've got Facebook and we've got Zoom and everything, but believe me, back in the 80s, no, and before that. So we were friends for a while through the pen pal system. And then Alison said, look, there's a convention in Leeds, which is my hometown. I'd like to come down for it. I said, well, come and stay with me. That way you don't have to worry about hotel fees. And she said, there's this guy there who is coming from Ireland to the convention as well. So can we all meet up? And I'm like, sure. So she came down on the Friday. It was the 19th, I think, of September. And the convention basically started on Friday. People were meeting up. It was at the Dragonara Hotel in Leeds. And I remember feeling a little awkward, my first ever convention, walking through the city centre with my friend Ali, who was also in drab. But we also had Han Solo, a Star Trek lieutenant, and Princess Shining Knight in the back, which was very fun. They were all in costume, and the looks we got were amazing. But then the next morning, we'd arranged to meet this one. And we were hovering around the hotel lobby at that time, wondering, who's who, because we hadn't got photographed and everything. We finally met up.
And I had met a guy called Ray the night before, and no, it wasn't anything like that. So the four of us met up, and we formed what was called the Fan Association of Star Trek.
That was our own little term.
That was our own little term, and we produced a couple of newsletters, and then we went on to produce a couple of magazines and so on. I suppose, though, my interest in science fiction started back in the kind of early 1970s, when I was sick in bed one day, and my mother brought me in a copy of the early Asimov Volume 1, which was a collection of short stories by one of the greats, Isaac Asimov, and he enthralled me with his descriptions of everything fandom, about his beginnings in New York fandom in the 1930s, and his association with John W. Campbell, and all the processes that he went through to get published for the first time and so on. And that whole world just enthralled me. It just got me hooked immediately. And a couple of years later, I found the Irish Science Fiction Association. And I've basically been involved in science fiction to a greater or lesser extent since, I'd say, 1976.
Well, myself, it was a friend of mine. I'd always liked reading, you know, what I call soft fantasy. I don't know, maybe fairy tales got me started, but a friend introduced me to Isaac Asimov when I was at school, and thank you, Pamela. And yeah, that's how I developed. I started going to the library, pulling books off the shelves and taking out the maximum number every time. Libraries were great resources at that time because I didn't have the money to keep going to shops and buying stuff. But yeah, that's how I started. And then we met.
Fantastic.
The
So
World Show.
you both were obviously being pen pals and writing to each other in between meeting up at conventions. So was it love at first sight, or did that take a little while to happen?
No, it took a while.
It took yeah, we were very much friends for a couple of years, and then the girl we mentioned earlier, Alison, got married, and it was at her wedding that we kind of clicked, let's say, and yeah, we took it from there.
Yeah, it was definitely the wedding it all started. Let's put it this way, I am not a person who is as slim as a rake, but at that time I slimmed down a lot and surprised her. And so, yeah, and it was still a long distance romance. I was still in Leeds and she was still in Dublin, so it was a little hard, but the conventions helped, meeting up at the conventions, and then we started meeting up at various family homes, etc., because we were still good friends. Alison in Scotland, Ray was from Birmingham. I actually went out with Ray before I went out with this one.
So you eventually moved to Ireland, Helen, obviously, or the long distance relationship might have petered out.
Yeah, it was a lot of challenges, and then when we got engaged, I was still studying in the UK. I'm a radiographer, and I actually remember I'd done my first set of my first finals, and I was all geared up to move. I was actually going to move to Wexford. I had a job lined up in Wexford, and unfortunately, my marks on one of the papers wasn't high enough, so I had to stay back and resit for 6 months. So that was a bit of a drag. But then I moved to Cork, and after a year, moved up to Dublin, and we got married in 1986. So.
Lovely.
But at that time, there wasn't really anything on the scene with regard to science fiction associations or anything like that. That took a while.
Yeah, well, the ISFA had been going since '76. I became chairman. I was convinced I was chairman in about '77, but it was actually '79 when I became chairman. And we held the first science fiction convention. I know there was a gaming convention in the late '70s, but the first science fiction convention in Ireland was in 1981 in the Clarence Hotel. And we've got at some point, we'll be talking about the Irish SF archive that a couple of people and myself are organising. And so all the program books and all the memorabilia from those will be up on an archive at some stage. But basically, we held two conventions in subsequent years, 1981, 82, ISFACON 1 and ISFACON 2. So the ISFA kind of was going for 7 or 8 years, then petered out a little bit. Then we ended up going to Conspiracy in 87, where we met a couple of Irish fans, old-time Irish fans, who said, listen, we've got to set up the ISFA again. And the ISFA then grew to a much bigger organization. And out of that came Octocon.
Yeah, I went to ISFACON too, and I was very impressed because James White was there, and Bob Shaw, and Anne McCaffrey, and Harry Harrison. I'm going, this is amazing. And yeah, I remember having a talk with a couple of the old ISFA members who started rambling on about constitutions and the constitution, going, no, we're friends, we're fans, let's just get together as friends and fans. But I think what was the first site of the ISFA meetings was the Vintage Pub on Camden Street, on the upstairs room, and that was.
Sorry, I just for the historians amongst the audience, It was actually the Parliament Inn. Well, no, the very first location for the ISA was the Sportsman's Inn down in Stillorgan in South Dublin. Then it moved to the Parliament Inn, where it was for quite a few years, and then it moved to the Vintage.
Okay.
The later iteration of
Well, the one I knew.
I just want to say one thing though. You mentioned about Harry and Jim and God rest their soul, etc., and Annie and Bob Shaw. I mean, little icons, you know, giants in our field. Incredible. I think you realised that I had a little bit of pull in the area when I sent you a book signed. I can't remember. I think it was an Anne McCarthy book.
It was Dragonfly.
It was Dragonfly, signed by Annie, James White, Harry Harrison, and Bob Shaw. So all four of them signed that book.
Actually, that was funny because I was a radiographer student in Leeds, and there was another guy on the course who was a science fiction fan. And during a break, he walked into the coffee room, saw me reading the Dragonfly book, and he went, "Oh yeah, I like that." You know, and I just turned to the frontispiece where the sign opened it up, and Michael just dropped to his knees and went, "Oh,
yeah." Weren't we blessed to have so many science fiction writers living in Ireland? So when you got Octocon going, I mean, you didn't get one of those writers as guest of honor. I mean, the first Octocon you managed a great coup, and you got the wonderful Terry Pratchett.
Yeah. Well, just going back to the ISFA, because that was where things really motivated us. I remember people like Brian Stableford, Robert Anton Wilson, and others coming across, a lot of whom the ISFA and Philippa and all the others who were involved in that. I actually wasn't on the ISFA, but all the people who were involved in that were very good at getting on with the publishers. And I do remember in later years, people like
Clive Barker
came across. Julian May was over for doing publicity and that. So the ISFA got an awful lot of very good,
high-profile authors.
High-profile authors, and very, you know, a lot of good feedback. And you know, we often think, I think it was Paramount or somebody, one of the film units often gave things like
press
previews and tickets for shows and things. So the ISFA was really well thought of at that time, and a lot of the people who are now good Irish writers, I mean, Moran and Michael Carroll, and who's guest of honour this year, I mean, they all came out the stable of the ISFA.
Quite a very fertile breeding ground. So the first Octocon, when did the planning start for that? It happened in 1990. So were you planning for a year or two beforehand, or?
It started in the autumn of '89, and basically for that one, it was a lovely artist called Peter McCanney, a big, tall, strapping guy.
Yeah, the program book, don't you?
No, I don't have that because I'm leaving it for later on.
Oh, right.
So I won't go too much detail, but Peter
we've planned this GOH interview very, very carefully to the second, you know?
No. Basically, I just finished my postgraduate exams, and I've been studying very hard for the year beforehand. So I had let everything slide. I'd go to the monthly meetings, but even then I didn't make them all because of the pressures of my study. So once I finished, I was very much at loose end, and Philippa said to me, listen, Peter McCanney and his friends are thinking of doing a convention. Why don't we see if we can help out? So I went to Peter and I said, what's the story about the convention? He got up and he said, we've got a logo. I said, yeah, but where's your location? Not sure, but we've got a logo. No, they were very much in the preliminary stages. And at that time, I think Philippa and I were the only two Irish, based people who had ever been to a convention.
Yeah.
Other than the GaelCons, which was a gaming convention, and a couple of VistaCons. We've been to Conspiracy, we've been to...
well, I've been to CCon, the first Worldcon in Brighton.
Yeah, we've been to loads of EasterCons, the British National Convention.
Yeah.
So we've done that. And fortunately at that time we had Carrie Moran, who most people who are fans on here might know as Carrie Sperring, the writer, and her partner Phil Nansen. And they were living in Ireland at the time, and they came along to the meeting. So between that and we got a load of good friends together, and we started the Octocon committee, and we just started putting feelers out. And the first Octocon was held in the Royal Marine Hotel in Dunleary, chosen for its size, its location, etc. And the fact that we were fortunate, we were on the Dart, it was bang opposite the ferry port for the UK fans and things like that. So, but I don't know how much depth we want to go in.
Yeah, because there is the Octocon at 30 later. But I suppose we did have some noteworthy fans across from the UK. Thinking of David Lally. Hi, Dave, if you happen to be watching.
Irish,
Irish based in London. Jim Steele. And quite a few people came across from the UK for it. And overall, I think it was a pretty good success.
Yeah, we planned for about 150. We got about 250, I think, for that one.
Yeah.
And then Terry. Actually, the fun thing about Terry is that we got him through his agent, and yes, he agreed to come to the convention. Before that, there was a world convention in Den Haag in the Netherlands called Conviction, and that was being held in the summer, and Octocon was obviously in the autumn. So we decided that all the committee, people like Michael Carroll, I was on the first committee, Rob Elliott, Ron Fitzgerald, myself, our friend Noreen and Mary. Noreen, I knew Mary from my work, and she and Noreen Monaghan, who later became a chair of Octocon, they were on the memberships. So we decided to go en masse to get everybody convention experience in Conviction, and it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Michael, do you remember the killer doors? The doors that flung out at you and things. It was a great convention, but we met up with Terry Pratchett there, and we told him, we're from Octocon, we're going to be hosting you in October. We're delighted you're coming. And he said, "Oh, that's great, yeah." I don't know how he came up, but basically said, "It's our first ever convention." And you could see his face kind of going, "Oh, good grief, they won't know what on earth they're doing." So I think in retrospect, we had a good time, and at that convention, we got a lot of background experience, which helped us. So, but it was just seeing Terry's face and thinking, "Oh my God, these people do not know what they're going to do."
And one other little story about Terry. He was a great guest, but he was paranoid about time. And on the morning that he was leaving, I think his flight was in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, and he insisted on going to Dublin Airport for 10 o'clock in the morning, something like that, like ridiculously early, because he didn't want to miss his flight. It was just one of those little foibles, little quirks about him. We've all got little quirks. And he wanted to be there kind of 5 hours beforehand, and he was adamant. So we had a kind of a goodbye breakfast planned, I think, something like that. Anyway, we didn't get to, but wonderful guest of honor, lovely, lovely guy.
Oh, brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
So your involvement with Octocon continued for a few years, and I must say I was only beginning to get back into science fiction, having enjoyed the reruns of the old Star Trek series that were coming on in preparation for the launch of the next generation. I was completely oblivious to this world of conventions, so I was very pleased when a friend in work introduced me to the ISFA, and then I discovered Octocon. And my very first Octocon was actually Octocon in 1992.
Wow, yeah.
That was a big one.
No.
That was a big one. But before that, we did have Jeff Ryman as our guest in 91. And that was very, very stressful convention. That year was the 25th anniversary of Star Trek. And we planned to do a few extra bits. One of the conventioneers was a guy called Dennis Caswell. He's Canadian, and when we found out that at Octocon in 1990, as well as Terry being guest of honour, our wonderful, wonderful stalwarts of SF, Anne McCaffrey, Catherine Kurtz, Diane Gray and Peter Morwood, all of those were coming to the convention. We found out Annie was going to that convention. He was a massive Annie McCaffrey fan, and he came across. So for the second one, he said, well, this is before streaming. Netflix was not thought of.
The internet was hardly thought of.
Hardly thought of. Yeah, I remember a lot of our stuff was done on dot matrix or your very old typewriter. But Dennis said, well, I can record the new Star Trek series, the first couple of episodes, and bring them to your convention, and you can play them, and they won't have been seen in the UK. The UK and Ireland got things 6 months later at that time. All the new shows aired in the US, and it was probably about 6 months later that you got them in
if you were lucky.
If you were lucky. Well, on TV anyway.
Yeah.
And so we said, that's wonderful. And because it was the 25th anniversary, we went to a convention in Glasgow called Silvercon. And one young guy, he was only 14, but he was Irish, was there, and we'd known him through the ISFA. And his mother was a writer for the RTE Guide. So we all went to Silvercon, had a wonderful time, met up with our friends in Scotland, and then his mother was there as a reporter, and she came back and she wrote an article. And at the bottom of the article was a bit where she wrote about Octocon, the science fiction convention. Yeah, sorry, I can hear scrabbling. That's our
I'm going to go. Can you do it?
Yeah, that's right. Just
the joys of Zoom at home, with animals around.
No, anyway, so Linda wrote this article, which was featured in the RT Guide, and she put at the bottom of it that there is this Octocon, the Irish National Science Fiction Convention, Royal Marine Hotel Dunleary, will be running a special stream of commemorations for the anniversary. Like I said, we got about 250 people to the first convention. The word that got out, we were planning for 400. 650 people descended on the doors that week.
Crazy.
And we couldn't, we were lit, there were people crying at the door, wanting to get in. And then it was a science fiction convention with a stream of Star Trek. But people were coming to it thinking it was a Star Trek convention,
Star Trek,
of which there had been none in Ireland, of course, at that stage. So it was quite an experience. Talk about success.
I will say for Octocon, and a lot of people are online from the UK, there was so much support, as there is now. There's so much mutual support between Ireland and England. A lot of the UK fans were really, really good. That weekend, I actually remember on the Friday, we'd had problems. I think there'd been a postal strike, so a lot of the programming letters had gone out and not been received, so the programming had to be all reshuffled. As well as Jeff Ryman, we had Colin Greenland, and I remember him saying, "You put me on 5 panels in one day," because everything got reshuffled. But at one point, I was running on zero. I had not had a chance to eat. I think I got 7 hours sleep in the whole weekend. And Kim Campbell, who, if there's anyone here from that era, Kim was one of the stalwarts of UK conventions. She just literally sat me down in the committee room with a Mars bar and said, "I'm running this," because we all took an hour or 2 hour shifts as the committee member in charge, and she just sat me down and said, "I'm running this. Sit down, eat your Mars bar, get your sugar levels back up," because you're shaking.
Yeah,
I was so exhausted, and I think that's the thing about science fiction conventions. You do really have a lot of great people who are out there who will support you and will help you and just dive in. And that's one thing about Octocon. It's never been a commercial thing. It's always been fans, the first people to pay their subscriptions as a committee. I think that's one thing that just follows me up. But
Yeah.
she sat me down and she made me rest because I was just like that.
So
It was fantastic weekend.
it not only didn't put you off running the next Octocon, which was your last one, but it also didn't put you off the notion of running a Star Trek convention. So was the idea of time warp in your head at that point, or did that spark it off?
I think Margaret, it was a case of we realized that this was an opportunity to do something for the fans, do something for charity as well, because we very quickly decided that it was going to be the Children's Hospital was going to be our chosen charity. And again, we had lots of contacts, lots of people that we could talk to about possible guests of honor and so on. And we ran a little teaser campaign.
Oh, I remember that teaser campaign.
And we used a person who was known in fan circles, but not very well known. He hadn't been particularly prominent, let's say. Dave McConnell, who hopefully is watching, but Dave came up to the house one Sunday, I think it was a Sunday, and he picked up some flyers that we had printed out, which we really should have copies. We had, anyway, it'll be up in the SF archive at some stage, where the convention was, the tagline was, come and meet a Starship Captain. Our cat's now trying to come into the, anyway, come and meet a Starship Captain. And everybody was wondering, oh my God, have they got Kirk? Have they got, who have they got? It must be Shatner. Must be Shatner. And it was George Takei, who was the absolutely most wonderful, wonderful guest of honor. I mean, the stories we could tell, we could spend an hour talking about George and how wonderful he was.
Time Warp 1. Time Warp 1 was, there were only 5 committee members?
5 committee members.
That's all. But we had fantastic people on logistics and helping out in security. John Vaughan.
John Vaughan, yeah.
Brilliant guy doing security. And Mike Carroll and all the others were also very involved. Rob Elliott and so forth. And the thing about that was we kept it very low key to start off with. But there was basically myself and Philippa, Dave and his wife, Dave McConnell and his wife Nicola, and Noreen Monaghan, because Noreen had chaired the Octocon 3 with Orson Scott Card. And so we ran it, but we were up at the Grand Hotel in Malahide, and George was our main guest of honor. Of course, we had a lovely couple, Peter and Diane, Peter Morwood and Diane Twain. We had Matt Irvine, I remember, coming from the UK, and that was thanks to contacts from Dave Lally. Thank you, Dave. That was a different experience because it was everything focused on Trek, but yeah, that was that. I co-chaired that with Dave on the first one, and we were very pleased with the way it turned out.
Well, we couldn't have been more successful. We had 1,200 attend. 1,200. It was the largest Star Trek convention in Europe up to that point. It was stunning. It just showed the appetite within Ireland for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can tell you, I was at it from the other side as an attendee, and I was just blown away by how enjoyable it was. And this is where it all gets complicated, because after the convention, I wrote a letter saying, thank you very much. It was absolutely wonderful. It must take a lot of work to get this going. And if you're ever running another one and you want some help, please contact me.
You fool,
Little did I know that a few months later I was going to be fingered. Margaret.
Yes.
I remember at the end of Octocon 1,
we need a secretary.
People are just going, we have to have another 2, and we're going, no.
And I have to say, just for everybody, just for your edification, when I discovered that there were 5 people on the committee and there wasn't a single walkie-talkie on site at that convention, having been involved in Time Warp 2 and knowing the amount of logistics, all of the extra bits and bobs that you had on that one, I just don't know how you guys did that first one. It was amazing. didn't look like there was only 5 people paddling very hard under the water to keep it going and run it.
Very paddling a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. And of course, there was one little story about Noreen, and we had a wonderful well, he was off duty for the convention. I won't give his surname. I'll just say John. He was a detective in the guards, and at one point he wandered. He said, I'll bring, because at that stage everything was in cash. There were very few bank cards. I mean, there were bank cards, but not a huge amount of them. So it was basically cash. So Noreen and this detective John walked down to the bank to lodge quite a considerable amount of money. And on the way back, Noreen said, well, is there any, like, you would have been able to protect me if anybody had tried anything. And he just opened his jacket, and inside he was armed. I mean, any of the people looking from America will go, so what? This was very, very unusual. He was a special detective. So that was a good.
I remember, John, at the we had a masquerade, and that's one of the things that's always been my love at conventions, and that's the masquerade. But John came Terminator 2, you know, the T2000, I think it was, and his cop outfit was a genuine one from when he visited. I think it was New York. He visited and got the outfit, the whole thing. The only thing is, the gun he wore there was prop.
Yeah,
because everything had to be key bonded at that time with regard to any weaponry on masquerades and things. But yeah, I mean, it was a matter of, what do you mean, John's armed? Oh my God! It was fun.
Yeah,
it was fun, but extremely exhausting.
Well, T2 was your swan song for con running, but it hasn't stopped you going to them and supporting people. And quite honestly, I think the amazing thing about Octocon is, as you say, the facility gave people to meet up and inspire each other. And you look at the people who developed writing careers like Michael, like Moran, and just generally for fans to meet up in a relaxed atmosphere and be supportive of each other, and, you know, say, it's okay, you like science fiction, it's really not that bad. Because quite honestly, I used to have more problems coming out as a Star Trek fan than I did when I actually came out. It was really more of a stigma around being a Star Trek fan. So I know you kind of dropped out of fandom, but you've always kept in touch with it. And I know, Philippa, you're working on a history of fandom and gathering together that ISFA archive.
That's right. Well, Margaret, I mean, for personal reasons, okay, I mean, I've been involved in science fiction for almost 25 years. When I took the decision to transition from male to female, it was something I basically had to do. So it was a case of I had to drop out because my head just could not take everything that was happening, both in the SF field and the convention field, and everything I wanted to do, but this overriding necessity, desire, want to progress and to find my true self. So unfortunately, I did have to drop out for a few years. Helen, I think, stayed a little bit involved, but not a huge amount. I retained a lot of friends, of course. But then once I came into my true self and started going back to conventions, I mean, I always approached transition and coming out and telling people with a sense of humor. And because otherwise, what's the alternative? You're depressed and upset. So I started going back to conventions before I'd fully transitioned, but I was very much androgynous and told a few select people what was happening. It was always interesting to see the reactions. Most of the reactions were positive. I was delighted with to keep friendships, lose a couple, but keep most friendships. And of course, then again, I do remember coming out to you, Margaret. Seeing as it's National Coming Out Day.
Yeah.
There was the Gay Trekkies group
That's right.
that met in Outings for many
Oh,
years.
they were fun.
Yeah, and I had been to a yeah. The cat made an appearance. She was desperate to get on camera. So I was chairperson of the Transgender Equality Network Ireland at that stage, and we'd had a committee meeting in one of the other rooms in Outhouse, which is the LGBT Resource Centre in Dublin. And when I was leading that meeting, I realised that there was the Gay Trekkies meeting in one of the adjoining rooms. And with my knees knocking together, and I am not joking, with my knees knocking together, with dry throat, terror in my eyes, I went in, because I hadn't come out to a lot of people at that stage, and certainly nobody within the science fiction field. And so when I saw you in there, I went, okay, this is it. I've got to take the next step. And well, that it was just amazing, and your acceptance and your understanding was so important to me, Margaret. So thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
You know what, she skipped one big portion of our life.
Well, of course, yeah, actually, that's
yeah. When time walked to our second one, which had Mabel Barrett Roddenberry as the guest, I was pregnant. We were expecting my little girl. And so that was one reason I had to pull back from conventions as well.
Yeah.
Because we had the situation, Philippa's transitioning, plus a little girl in the household, who attended quite a few conventions herself when she was young. Yeah. Got on TV as a fairy princess. Went to DizzyCon, your convention, DizzyCon,
yes.
The baby Davros. And that kind of stuff. So we were trying to bring her up to be a con brat, but it didn't pan out. She's not a science fiction fan, not in any great sense anyway.
No.
But yeah, so that was a big step in our lives as well. So that's why I did one more convention as co-chair, and that was Eurocon '97 with Dave Stewart. And I will say that although they very kindly gave me the title of co-chair, I have to say, because of the having to look after Jenny and having to look after this one, it was a case of Dave Stewart, the late great Dave Stewart. I can't praise him enough. He took on so much of the burden of that convention. It was just amazing. And to have Eurocon in Ireland in '97 was great. Harry Harrison was guest of honour, as far as I remember, and the Irish Science Fiction magazine, Albedo, won Best Magazine.
Best magazine.
Best magazine.
Small press.
Small press magazine. So, well, know that we contributed to that part of fandom is amazing.
It is, and you know, even getting Eurocon was such a huge thing for Irish fandom at the time. But even more amazing than that, from that breeding ground of Octocon has come a bunch of people, and we pulled off Worldcon in Dublin in 2019. How cool is that?
I know, incredible.
I know.
Brilliant. Well done, everybody.
Yeah. Actually, I remember one time, it wasn't an Octocon. There was a convention called Trincon 400, and it was when Trinity College here in Dublin was celebrating its 400th anniversary. They ran a science fiction convention. And I remember a lot of us going out for a meal. I went to a pub, and the bar staff were taking orders for food, etc. And they were going, they said to this young man, what would you like to drink? And he got really teed off. James Bacon got really teed off when we pointed out he wasn't 18 yet. So yeah, I've known James since he was 18, and James and Gareth and everybody, Brian and everybody in 2019, fantastic.
Brilliant work.
Thank you very much for a Dublin Worldcon.
Yeah. We can go on chatting forever, as people have probably figured out at this point. We've got lots of memories to share, but I just see there's a question has come up here from certain people in Belgium who want us to divulge.
Hello, Graham.
what names did we use when we were part of Gay Trekkies? Well, Gay Trekkies at the time were actually the only Star Trek fan group going, and we met about once a month or once a quarter eventually in an outhouse, and we bring along some food, so we had a bit of a potluck and we'd watch some episodes. It was great fun. It was the person who came up with the idea and man who called herself the Emergency Communications Hologram. I called myself Lieutenant Commander Spoof. So I can't remember whether you two picked names when you were coming, because you dropped in and were very supportive of the Gay Trekkies, and you often popped in for a meeting.
Yeah, I was Dax, because I was, she was very much my model, you know, the one I wanted to look like, wanted to be. Yes. So for a couple of reasons, that's why I chose Dax.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I was paramedical, I chose name's gone. The female Vulcan doctor from Next Gen.
Oh yeah.
I was wanting to say Savick, but it wasn't Savick.
No, I'm not.
Oh, Dr. Solar.
Solar. Well done. Yeah.
Well done, Margaret. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was fun to have names like that, and Annie, who ran it, was Michelle, and
absolutely perfect name for Annie. And I'm going to spill the beans on our friends in Belgium, who basically call themselves Councillor Tragedy and Captain.
Yes.
Well, this is it. This is the international nature of fandom. I mean, when we had Jenny, we dropped back. I mean, after Octocon 3 with Orson Scott Card, which was massive, we with the Royal Marine, we'd taken over one of the ballroom meeting rooms. Well, not the ballroom. We took over one of the big rooms for the first 2 conventions. We could never afford the ballroom, so with Orson coming across, we took the ballroom and it was subdivided into dealer's room, art room, fan room, etc.
We could only do that from the profits of Octocon 2 because of the Star Trek aspect.
Yeah,
so that's
Octocon 3 barely broke even.
And Octocon 3, even with the profits from Octocon 2, barely broke even. So.
But the thing is, we dropped out because we wanted to do other things. We wanted to do time warps. We had fantastic people taking over in 1993, etc., and running forward.
Yeah, I mean, like we always had a lot of other interests, even within SF. We were producing fanzines, you know, right from the beginning of our relationship. There's a couple of them there.
And of course, you're involved with Albedo 1. Yeah, we could do a whole
I was involved
if you wanted, you know.
Well, the ISFA magazine was actually, Albedo 1 was a separate enterprise, but the ISFA magazine with Dave McCann, FTL,
and the newsletters and all the other publications and events. So I mean, it was even if we weren't involved in Octocons, I was still very much involved in ISFA, and Helen was on the periphery. And you were writing or you were doing bits and pieces, you know.
I mean,
so,
one of the things, like I said, Jenny's first convention, our daughter's first convention, was a baby in arms. And actually, I will give a shout out to Leonia, because her friends in Teresa and Leonia were fantastic at the conventions, because if I was ever doing anything, they'd babysit for me, look after Jenny. They loved looking after Jenny. It was so fun. But I mean, for instance, when Jenny was 3, we went with Norrie Monaghan to Buccaneer, the World Convention in Baltimore. We've been to MagicCon in Orlando back in '92. So we were trying to get to other conventions as well. And then Noreen and I went to one of the Polycons in Liverpool and so forth. And I think I was interviewing people at that convention for FTL or for the other magazines. So I was still very involved in doing stuff, even though we weren't convention running at that time. So 95 is when our last full convention was, and then I did 97. So we are dropped back a wee bit, but we still keep going. And very, very supportive of.
As I said, one of the things that I found about the science fiction community when I came out as a lesbian in about summer '99 was the love and support and acceptance that I got from members of the science fiction fandom community. It's always a very open-minded, I feel, and an accepting group by and large, and you get tremendous support from them, which I hugely appreciated. So it was lovely to pay that back to you and to Helen, because you were having a tough time there with a lot of the transitioning stuff. It's a hard thing to go through. And full credit to you both. You're still together. It's not common for that to happen in the trans community. And you know, anytime I meet up with you, what I always feel is you feel the love there, and particularly when your wonderful daughter Jenny is with you, that makes it all complete. So thinking of Jenny, and I don't know whether she's online today. If she is, hi Jenny, miss you. So yeah,
she's off somewhere with the boyfriend upstate New York. Enjoying herself hiking, yeah. So yeah. I somehow don't think she's online.
She might yet see it.
She might see the recording. Yeah.
If she sees the recording, there she goes. It's an absolute pleasure talking to you guys. I don't know how are we doing for time. Have we any more questions? I don't think we have. No, I think it was just that. It was just that one about our gay trekking.
Nice one. Yeah.
So
well, I mean, the thing is, in a way, because we had to drop back from active involvement for so long. We're just really grateful that we had the opportunity to chat to people like this at the convention. We love dropping into the ones that were in Camden Court. When they went to Blanchetown, it's not so easy, where there's rare people who don't drive and don't have a car. So it's not so easy to get to those. But yeah, what I love now is the rejuvenation of the SF fandom. There's so many wonderful TV series out. The book room was just a revelation at Worldcon last year, and to have Worldcon in Ireland was just, I just feel a tiny bit proud that we helped start some of the people off there. The people who are running that convention.
You started off something and inspired us. I mean, I don't think any of us would have thought back in those early days that it would have been possible for Ireland to host a Worldcon. So it's, you know.
Oh, we were thinking about it. We did think about it.
And even in the eyes of Bay, back in the late 70s, when we started running Octocon 1 and 2, 81 and 82, in the back of our mind was, first of all, an EasterCon. Because although we obviously we're not part of the UK, but there was talk about bringing the British EasterCon to Dublin back in the kind of the middle 80s, 1980s. Obviously, it never happened, but it was just an option. So we were thinking bigger even at that stage. But the problem is, as most people who run cons and run SF associations realize, there is burnout. Yeah, and eventually, after 25 years, that's what for personal reasons, both, you just don't have the energy. The enthusiasm is still there. And every time I go to a convention and I see more and more of the older fans and make new friends and have new ideas and so on, and that's where the archive came in. And Kate and I are planning. Kate Shee and I and some others. James Shields and so on, others are planning on doing quite a lot with that archive, because here we are, we're talking for roughly 50 minutes. I have probably 5 suitcases worth of material up in the attic to scan, and that's only me. So everybody has material and photographs and so on. So at some stage, we're going to do that. So this is kind of the official, if you like, announcement of the archive, and we'll see where it goes.
So there is on the Discord, there's a page, or there's a room for the Irish Science Fiction Archive. So if people want to log on to that and help us out, and mostly Philippa.
Yeah, I was going to say us. What do you mean us? Because you're not helping out, I didn't think. But great if you are.
I'm always helping out.
Yeah, of course.
So you're looking for people to upload any memorabilia they have, photos and all of that sort of thing?
Give us time to sort it out, because this is going to be a proper archive. Like, it'll be extremely high quality material and scans and so on. So give us a while to sort it out, but yeah, keep in touch.
That sounds like an absolute labour of love for you, Philippa.
Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely.
Because you know me, Margaret, I'm not doing anything else.
No.
No, no, no.
Come on, I do it.
So have you got a publication date for the autobiography yet? For those who don't know, Philippa has been working on her autobiography, story of her life and her transition. So that's due for publication soon, is it, Philippa?
Well, I'm hoping so. I think COVID, unfortunately, has caused a lot of issues as regards publishing. Certainly the company that I'm with, Mercier Press down in Cork, I know the managing editor was having awful trouble trying to get stuff sorted out. So the first draft is with them. They're going to get back to me with probably, 2 years worth of edits, which I'll probably do in 2 or 3 weeks. We'll see. So originally the publication date was planned for kind of spring next year. So we'll see how it goes.
Excellent. I just see a question here about the archive. Is there an email address that people can send material to or to contact the archive? And is that available for people to see on Discord, by the way?
It will be. I will put everything up on Discord as soon as we come off air.
Great, fantastic. Lovely. So I don't know how much more time have we got left. We can just keep nattering until we're
here or there.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk for hours, but I'm just also thinking about the time because I'm looking at 14:52. Oh, there we go. Who's that?
Okay, I've got to wrap it up.
Happy
So I'd love to thank the Octocon for inviting
oh.
Helen and Philippa as fan guest of honor, and to thank Helen and Philippa for doing me the great honor of asking me to be their interviewer. I hope you all enjoyed some of their reminiscences. There's loads more, so there you go. Thanks so much to the Octocon committee, and thank you all for tuning in. Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.